Hello and welcome everybody to another episode of the cEDH cast. My name is Ian, and with me as always is my co-host Braden.
Hey guys!
On this week's episode, we are going to be talking about some new spice that we're working with in the cEDH world. And we're going to be talking about some deck lists that we've both been working on separately and kind of bring it to you guys. So, before we do any of that, we have, as always, our patron shout out. Braden, take it away.
Alright, our patron this week is Sage. Sage is a competitor to your patron. Thank you very much for your patronage, and we're happy to have all of our patrons. We're going to start putting out some t-shirts soon, so if you're interested in that, go check out the Patreon, or reach out to Ian or I, and we can see what we can do about getting you a t-shirt.
Yeah, one, thank you very much, Sage, for the support of the show, and two, we're super pumped about the t-shirts, and hopefully we will have those out as soon as possible. Moving on to the main topic, we are going to be talking about some new spice that we are working with in cEDH. So, Braden, I know you are very excited to talk about this. Do you want to talk about your new Yuriko list?
Sure. So, I have a story for you all. Whenever I have ever played casual EDH, I always ask to play Yuriko. Yuriko is one of my favorite commanders. I think it's awesome flavorfully. I think the ninjutsu ability is super interesting. And I also just like blue-black a lot. That's basically my two favorite colors, except for maybe green. But I had never built a blue-black cEDH deck. When I started playing cEDH, I built Zur Doomsday because that was the hot best deck in the format back then. And then Thrasios and Tymna came out, and I've been jamming that for years. So I thought I would try something different. And I got a Judge promo at the recent Judge conference in Philly. So I thought to myself, this is a good time to build a deck. So I built a Yuriko list. I built it very differently than anyone else's I saw online. And I'm really, really happy with it. I've played it for a couple days now. And I've played a bunch of games. And it's super overperformed. And it's been so fun to play. It's a blast.
Cool.
The name of the deck, by the way, is Small Blue. S-M-O-L, small.
Yeah, you really love this descriptor plus color naming convention, huh?
There's nothing better.
You know, I gotta say, at least it's better than I'm gonna see what Scryfall auto-generates for the name .meme.
Pancake Waffle Cat.
Yeah, exactly.
Although Cinnamon Toast Crunch is one of the best deck names of all time, so I can't hate on Scryfall too much. So, my Yuriko list, which we will post in the description, is kind of weird. The average converted mana cost, not counting lands, is 1.85. There's no cards over 5 mana. The only 5-drops in the deck are Ad Nauseam, Force of Will, Submerge, and I think that's it. Curve is super low. There's a couple 4-drops, like Notion Thief, and there's a Ninja I'm playing. But besides that, the curve is super low. There's 2 primary win conditions in the deck, and it's Doomsday, using a Thassa's Oracle line, and then, your classic Jace, Thassa's Oracle consult plan.
Yeah, and that's kind of different because, as you mentioned, all the CMCs for that deck are super low, whereas the average Yuriko list is trying to flip over a large spell and dome the table for between 10 to 13.
Yeah, I've sacrificed Yuriko's Plan C win condition or Plan B win condition where you attack people's life totals for Ad Nauseam, basically. And I think Ad Nauseam is a better archetype of possible things to do than draining my opponents for 10 life and not being able to play those cards very consistently. Because the interesting thing about Yuriko decks is that they're incentivized to play no mana rocks, because your whole game plan wants to be play a 1-drop that's unblockable, attack with it on turn 2, put Yuriko into play. And so your whole deck is warped around that, so you never have a good time to play your 2 mana rocks, so you don't really play that many.
Makes sense.
And you're in blue-black, so you don't even have access to that many. So it's kind of interesting in that when you build Yuriko, you basically have to play these cards that are harder to cast in your deck than most decks already, and then you get some upside in that you can just sometimes kill your opponents.
So knowing exactly that most Yuriko decks do have that sort of plan B with the deck, why specifically did you choose Yuriko? What does Yuriko specifically provide for your deck that makes you want to be in this blue-black shell?
Sure. I think that is an interesting question, right? So I guess the answer is there's nothing. There really isn't anything. And I think a lot of people will say, well, if you're going to play Yuriko, you should at least, play into her synergies, right? But her synergies are in playing low mana spells because you don't have access to a ton of ramp. So I'm kind of doing that. Ad Nauseam and Yuriko actually do have synergy in that she kind of requires you to play these really low cost bad cards, and then because of that, you don't end up being able to play that many rocks on curve. which is like kind of fine for ad nauseum decks.
Right.
If you ad nauseum and you flip over a 1 mana dork, you're just like, all right, 1 life, let's go to the next card.
Yeah, whereas like a lot of decks, I know when I play like Thrasios Tim now, like I'm sometimes flipping over like a Force of Will and a Bloom Tender. I mean, obviously a Force of Will, but things like Bloom Tender and Fabro Elder, like these cards start to like add up after a while because they're the medium of the deck. Whereas in this deck, I feel like you're flipping over things like Ginger Brute.
Yeah, and sure, like I'm playing. It says here 15 creatures, right? And if you look, sure, I'm playing cards like Spellseeker, Notion Thief, Dark Confidant, Ingenious Infiltrator, Lab Maniac. Sure, like those cards also have high mana costs, but if you look at like the average CST list, like they're also playing those cards, except for Ingenious Infiltrator. Right. That's just a really niche card for Yuriko.
Yeah, I feel like you can't play the deck without that one.
Yeah. But if you look at the average mana cost of my creatures, it's actually pretty low, and I'm not running many creatures. And if you look at the average cost of my spells, it's actually also quite low, which makes sense. Like, when I'm playing Yuriko, I'll keep a hand with 1 land and, like, 6 1-drops. Yeah. That's the thing that's, like, happened. And then I'm like, oh, this is sick. So, yeah. And when it comes to, like, that plan C of Yuriko, I just fundamentally disagree that, like, that's better than anything else, you know? Like, if you look at Najeela, I think Najeela is, like, way better than Yuriko. If your goal is to have a commander that creates card advantage and puts pressure on people, I think Crom's better than Yuriko. If you want to play a commander that creates pure card advantage, I think Tymna is more consistent than Yuriko. I do think Yuriko can be better than Tymna. Like, I've had games where Yuriko is just, like, drawing me 6 cards a turn, which is, like, insane. Mm-hmm. But, like, there's also, I haven't played these games yet, but I know they're out there, where Yuriko just does nothing for 10 turns and I lose. And so, like, I'm not going to pretend that Yuriko's better than Tymna. But the highs and the lows, and I don't know where the average sits, above or below Tymna. Probably below, because Tymna's broken.
Yeah.
But the average sits somewhere differently than Tymna, but it has way higher highs and way lower lows, is what I'd say. Additionally, you don't get a partner that does something broken. But my counterpoint to that is that Yuriko doesn't have a commander tax, really. So
yeah, that's pretty good.
Like, I've had, like, turns where, like, I'm attacking with 3 creatures, someone kills a Yuriko, and I'm like, okay, I'll just ninjutsu Yuriko back in, thanks, because people just don't understand how the interaction works.
Right. I've played against a couple of Yuriko decks, slightly different than yours. They're probably focused more on the big CMC versions, but I definitely have those moments where you kind of have this nihilistic, like, what's the point?
Yeah. I will say, though, that there's, like, other people who are working on a list like this. So when I started building the list, I was like, oh, I'm so cool that I'm building this version of Yuriko no one else has. And, like, after I put up the list, I found there were, like, 2 or 3 other people working on lists like this that just weren't posting them online or were in the building stages and hadn't put it together yet. So, like, this isn't, like, a crazy idea.
Yeah, but it's interesting, and it's a unique take on a deck that people just kind of sometimes streamline and think you can only make one way.
Yeah, I do think Yuriko is one of the most interesting commanders. I would say Yuriko has, like, one of the widest power level bands, right? Like, you can do hardcore ninja tribal, you can do, like, extra turn Yuriko where you're playing, like, these 15 drops and, like, 12 drops and stuff and 5 drops, or you can play, like, a tuned version of that, or you can play this version. Like, I think, like, the whole band of power level is available with just Yuriko, which is, like, pretty cool.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited to keep playing this list. I built the deck on Monday in one day. I then played it on Tuesday after making some changes, after having some discussions with people in the Yuriko Discord, and I won the event I played it in. So in the first event I ever played Yuriko, I actually won the event, which is
pretty good.
Which is pretty good. I will say that, whenever you play a rogue list, you do have an advantage. We saw that with Tatiova and Heliod and Una.
Yada, yeah.
and maybe Isan, if you even consider that a rogue list. But as I was playing the deck, it didn't feel like I was playing bad cards. And I didn't even have the Doomsday line in the deck at that point. I added it immediately after with my prize winnings. So I'm very happy with Yuriko right now.
So can you go more into that Doomsday line? I'd love to hear about that.
Sure. So with Doomsday, you resolve a Doomsday, then you attack with the ninja to pop open the pile. So what Doomsday does is you search your graveyard and library for 5 cards. You choose those 5 cards. You exile all of the other cards. So your graveyard and library basically get exiled, but those 5 cards. And then you put those 5 cards in any order.
And you lose half your life.
Yeah, you also lose half your life, but you're winning the game, so it doesn't really matter. So the Doomsday pile, as I play it, it costs 5 mana basically. But if you have a ritual to pay for the Doomsday, it's like way less.
Oh, does that include the Doomsday?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's 5 mana including Doomsday. So what you do is resolve Doomsday, you choose 5 cards, Gitaxian Probe, Brainstorm, Thassa's Oracle, Lotus Petal, and Pact of Negation. You can play Mox Opal instead of Pact of Negation, but I don't think Mox Opal's good in my list personally. So I'm just not playing it, and I'm just using that slot to play Pact Negation. If you have like a full grip of counterspells, you can also choose Chrome Mox to make the pile cheaper. So what you do is you put Gitaxian Probe on top, you put Brainstorm under it, and then you put the 3 other cards. So you'll crack the pile, so you'll draw the first card by attacking with Yuriko. You'll draw Gitaxian Probe. You'll Gitaxian Probe your opponent, draw the Brainstorm. So then you cast Brainstorm, you draw Thassa's Oracle, and the 2 other cards, probably a Lotus Petal and a Pact of Negation in my list. Then you put 2 cards from your hand on top, so you should probably at least have 2 other cards in your hand. So you play the Lotus Petal, crack it for a blue, and then you need another blue mana, and you play Thassa's Oracle, and then you have the Pact of Negation as protection for the Thassa's Oracle. Thassa's Oracle resolves. You probably have 3 or 4 devotion, but you really only need 2 devotion because you Brainstorm, put 2 cards back on top, and you win.
Cool. So, unlike a lot of Thassa's Oracle moments, you will need the devotion to at least be something, which is the 2.
Yeah, or if you have, like, I mean, if it's that big of a problem, there's definitely solutions. Like, instead of a Pact of Negation, you can put in a Winds of Rebuke would work. Yeah, you could, like, do a Winds of Rebuke.
Oh, yeah.
You could Winds of Rebuke your Thassa's Oracle if you have enough mana. It's pretty cute.
Hot.
So, yeah, there's options. It's definitely not the best pile, but I think when you're just in blue-black, having, like, 3 win conditions instead of, like, 2 win conditions is probably worth it.
Yeah, I mean, and that's definitely, like, the plan B of your deck, right? So that's a pretty cool thing to just have for 1 card in the deck. I mean, you're not really switching anything out just to play it. You already had those other cards.
Yeah, I mean, I'm supposed to be playing Mox Opal. I'm like, that maybe is supposed to be a dead card I'm supposed to be running, but
sure.
I just don't want to play dead cards. Maybe I'm wrong.
Have you thought about Mox Amber?
I have. I don't know if it's good enough.
Yuriko and Derevi are like the only decks I would ever really think that you would like be more inclined than in other lists to jam it, just because, as we mentioned earlier, you do always have that access to your commander. So
it just seems like a win more card and a lose more card, which Yuriko is already.
That's fair.
If you think about it, like, Yuriko is a lose more and a win more card. So I just don't like the idea of like playing more into that, but maybe that's like how you're supposed to play Yuriko. I don't know. And when it comes to like Doomsday being plan A or plan B, to be honest, I don't know. That's like me having to figure out the list. Like, I just built this deck a couple days ago. There's a lot of stuff I don't know about it.
Yeah, well, it's exciting to learn something new like that.
Yeah, I get to play some really interesting cards, like Brazen Borrower. So Brazen Borrower is a 3-mana 3/1 with flash, flying, and it can only block creatures with flying. But it has an adventure, which is Petty Theft. Return target non-land permanent an opponent controls to its owner's hand. So the cool thing about Brazen Borrower is you can cast Petty Theft, put Brazen Borrower into exile, cast Brazen Borrower, attack with it, use it to ninjutsu and Yuriko, bounce it back to your hand, and now you just basically bounced a permanent back to your opponent's hand and got a Yuriko for 2 mana, or I guess like 5 mana if you count the Brazen Borrower. But it's like card advantage. Like you basically get this like loop where every time Yuriko dies, you get to bounce something to an opponent's hand, and it's usually going to be a blocker for Yuriko, or it can even be like a stacks piece, or some piece of their combo that they're starting to build up. So I've been really impressed by Brazen Borrower.
Speaking of stacks, what are you playing as far as stacks pieces?
I'm playing Grafdigger's Cage and Counterbalance, as well as, Mystic from Orin and Mystic Study. So my deck doesn't play any recursion except for Time Twister, if you even count Time Twister as recursion. Oh, I'm also on Curse Totem. I forget that's like even a stacks piece.
Wow.
Yeah, sorry. I guess I'm on Curse Totem now. How funny is that?
I can't believe you had the audacity to say that.
I just forgot. I'm bad at this game.
Call as me. I forgot it was a stacks piece. How dare
It's just
you.
so good. I thought it was like it's like Ristic Study, you just forget.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm on Curse Totem, Grafdigger's Cage, and Counterbalance. I'd say like those are the like stacksy cards I'm on.
Yeah. Those are some pretty good ones to be able to run.
In like a hard consultation list, I think those are really good.
Hmm.
I don't think that Opus Thief can play Grafdigger's Cage, can it?
In the maybe board, there is an option of taking out Yawgmoth's Will and Underworld Breach and swapping them out for Rest in Peace and Grafdigger's Cage.
It seems kind of suspect.
It depends on the meta. Like,
Okay.
I've talked with Schaefer about it a couple times. Like, if you're playing exclusively Hulk and World Gorger decks, like, that's when you do
Sure.
it. The deck's really good being able to have access to its graveyard like that,
Yeah.
though.
I will say then a benefit of Yuriko is you get to play Curse Totem and Grafdigger's Cage
Oh, yeah. And Consult.
and Console, yeah.
Seems like a really good place to be. Yeah, I'm actually really interested in trying this list out, because you're playing Curse Totem, so I can't really ever go wrong there.
And you own almost all the cards.
Yeah, I think I probably own every single card, because I had a casual Yuriko deck for a very long time.
Sick.
Now, looking at your list right now, I know you said you just added the Doomsday pile. Is there anything else you maybe want to adjust or change, given your first couple days of testing?
I think Artificer's Assistant must have a better alternative. I don't know what it is yet, but there must be a better card than it. I haven't been disappointed by it. Every time someone looks at my list, they're like, Artificer's Assistant? You're on 12 artifacts. And I'm like, yeah. So I'm not thrilled by it, but I'm not like disappointed by it. Another card is Submerge. I play against a lot of Opus Thief, and I've had Submerge be dead like 2 out of the 6 or 7 games I've played. And additionally, I think it is kind of bad into like an Ad Nauseam deck. I don't think this deck is a turbo Ad Nauseam deck. I just think it's like a deck that wants to play Ad Nauseam. I don't think this is a turbo Ad Nauseam deck. I think this is a deck that wants to play Ad Nauseam as like a value card that draws quite a few cards and like puts you pretty ahead in the game. And Submerge isn't necessary to cut, but I do think it goes against that general plan, because if you rip a Force of Will and a Submerge, that's 10 life, and now you're like really, really sad about your Ad Nauseam.
Sure.
So those are the cards I'm thinking about.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Have you thought about... Now, this is a pretty spicy number. Have you thought about Run Away Together?
No?
Do you know what that
I'm
card
very
is?
aware. That's like one of my favorite cards. I love cards like that.
Oh, really?
I do love bouncing my own Gilded Drake back to my hand and removing a blocker at the same time. I think I'm already on so many bounce spells with Brazen Borrower and Submerge and Winds of Rebuke that even if I cut Submerge, I'm probably fine. I'm also on Cyclonic Rift. Maybe I cut Cyclonic Rift for Run Away Together.
Oof, that's rough cut.
Yeah.
So probably not.
It's not ridiculous.
Cool. For those who do not know, Runaway Together is an instant for 1 and a blue, and it allows you to bounce up to 2 target creatures controlled by different players. So that's kind of cool, because you can really 2 for 1.
I think this list is really interesting, and I'm excited to work with some of the other people who have similar thoughts on Yuriko and like the direction it should go. I will say that I think Yuriko is better than it is currently often being played with. Like, I think there's a better list out there. And there's a better list for almost every deck archetype, right? Like, every meta probably has a slightly better version of, like, a stock list that is, like, more tuned to it, right? That's probably what Medium Green really is. It's just, like, a stock CST list that's been tuned to an extreme end for a meta. So, there's always going to be a better list. But I do think that Yuriko, in the way I'm building it, is in a different direction than the list that's like on the DDB or the Discord list that's like pretty popular. And a lot of those people think I'm like not right on this topic. But I do think that the people I've talked to about this who are also on the same page as I am are making a lot of really good points. And they're also really knowledgeable and played a lot of other decks in the format. I've talked to Noobs about this list, and I've talked to Kai about this list, and I talked to one of the people who went to the DDM gaming event. He's also building a very similar list with Ad Nauseam. I've seen another list by Fireriff that was playing Ad Nauseam, although I didn't spend too much time looking at the list. And Fireriff is pretty competent in my experience. So there is a future for Yuriko where it is better than it is currently widely considered today. However, it's never going to be like the best blue-black consultation deck. I think it might one day be the best like Doomsday deck, though.
I could easily see that, yeah.
We'll see.
Very cool, man.
All right, so Ian, what list are we hearing about from you?
Well, I have been working on a couple lists right now. As those who have been listening to our show for quite some time know, my ADHD manifests itself through deck building. So I'm often working on a new list, probably every week. That being said, I think last time, did we talk about my Keranos list in any detail before?
I'm not sure.
I'd think so.
Like to hear more about it, though.
Sure. So that list kind of came about from a discussion that I had with Braden a while ago about how that there's an underutilized combo in the format, which is the Isochron Scepter plus Mystical Tutor and having a Nexus of Fate in your deck, which basically allows you to take infinite turns. However, I think we've talked about it before, there are some downsides in the fact that like it doesn't win you the game because you're not drawing. So with Keranos, it actually mitigates that downside because Keranos allows you to reveal the first card you draw every turn. And when you reveal the Nexus of Fate, it will deal 3 damage to any target. So therefore, while you're executing the loop, you're dealing 3 damage a turn, and it doesn't matter that you're not drawing anything because you have an infinite loop, so therefore you are killing each opponent. Simple, sweet, to the point. I loved that part of the deck. However, I'm someone who really does not like having a deck without a plan B. So I've been testing a lot of plan Bs for the deck. I originally just threw some value turn spells in there. That was okay, but I haven't taken a dive into that one as effectively as I probably should have. That's the way that I'm probably going to push the list going forward. I tried a different variant that was closer to the old Blue Moon Keranos, like way back from like 2016, 2017, which was like Wildfire and Static Orb and Yockle Hops, like things to just destroy all permanents except for Keranos, basically. And it was an interesting way to take the deck. I don't know if I gave that enough time, but the main issue I was having with it was that all of these stacks pieces actually contradict the main win con, because the Nexus of Fate loop requires you to at least have 8 mana. And if you're under a Static Orb, like, that ain't gonna happen anytime soon. So that was a little frustrating to, like, try and build a deck with those 2 contradictions. And the third way I tried building it, and this way is good for a deck that is not this one. I really am excited to brew around this win condition, and that's Underworld Breach in the Is It colors. There are a number of combinations that allow you to mill your entire library. Any wheel effect plus dramatic reversal. Well, and you also need the sufficient artifacts to basically get you there. Basically allow you to mill your whole deck, and then you just play a Thassa's Oracle from your graveyard. You can also use the Grinding Station loop, which has become very popular in... It got Underworld Breach banned in Legacy and is now being looked at in Modern. Grinding Station and Underworld Breach and any 0 mana artifact, you can cast the 0 mana artifact out of your graveyard. With the Enter the Battlefield trigger on the stack, you can use Grinding Station to sacrifice the artifact and mill yourself for 3. This creates a loop where you are exiling 3, milling 3, exiling 3, milling 3, exiling 3, milling 3, until you don't have a deck anymore. Then you play a Thassa's Oracle out of your graveyard, which is awesome. I mean, it's a very, very efficient loop.
If you are sacking like a Mox Opal, each time you get to actually tap it for a mana, so it's especially powerful there. So you get to make however many cards are in your deck divided by 3 times mana, which means that you can actually like win with protection a lot of the time, especially if you already had a lot of cards in your graveyard. Very powerful.
Yeah, and so that loop was powerful on its own, but once again didn't really do anything with the main point of that deck. I have actually been talking to a couple people about maybe pursuing that combo and like really abusing Underworld Breach in a graveyard sense and combining that with Joyra and having that as an alternate win con, because it feels like that avenue of victory, 1, works really well with the KCI plan a lot of them are already playing, and 2, it kind of fills the hole that Paradox Engine had created when it was banned. No way am I saying this is equivalent to a Paradox Engine. I just think it's the alternate that we have that is legal in the format. And Underworld Breach in general, I've talked to you, Braden, I've talked to Shaper about it a couple times. We all kind of think it's very underutilized at this point, and there's a lot of brewing that can still really happen with it. So,
do you want to brew a deck right now?
We can brew a deck, yeah.
All right. So this is a deck I've been like really thinking about, and a friend of mine in my local playgroup also has like slowly been brewing towards it. It's Silas Wren, Crom.
Oh, yeah, this deck.
So Silas Wren lets you, when it deals combat damage to a player, it lets you choose an artifact in your graveyard and play that card from your graveyard until the end of turn. It's also an artifact itself, so like if you need an artifact to sack to Grinding Station to start the loop, or at least just a value artifact to sack, you just always have one in the command zone. Also, it helps you turn on Mox Opal, which is like surprisingly relevant. So basically, the idea of the deck is that you use like KCI loops and Wishclaw Talisman with Goblin Engineer and Goblin Welder and Silas Wren to build this like Graveyard Strategy and Grixis, and then you also have Crom, so you can just like play Crom, which is just a really good commander. So that's a deck I've been brewing for cEDH, and I have a friend who has a cEDH list now that's in Brea, I'm pretty sure, or it's Silas Timna or Silas Bruce, I don't know, but it's a deck that I know several people are brewing, and that deck is super fun. I don't know if it's good though.
It's actually kind of funny. Before Underworld Breach was banned in Legacy, there were a bunch of pros talking about this avenue that you could take the deck where you take LED and any tutor, and at that point you are just making mana, tutoring something out of your deck, making mana, tutoring something out of your deck. So basically, if you have like a demonic tutor and an LED, or I mean, they were using infernal tutor at the time, but we have demonic tutor, so like no need for internal tutor. But if you have that combo, you basically just win the game at that point, which is pretty freaking awesome.
Entomb also does that.
Yeah, fair, very fair.
One interesting thing about the Silas Ren deck I've been working on is that it plays the Bolas Citadel Sensei's Divining Top loop, and so like with Goblin Engineer, it's like you just cheat in a Bolas Citadel sometimes, and then if you hit like an Aetherflux Reservoir, you just like feel really good.
Yeah, I mean, at that point you just kind of win.
Yeah, so the deck is sweet.
Yeah, that's pretty exciting. And I think in general, Underworld Breach has a lot of places that it wants to go, and it's exciting to think that maybe we can get there. Now, when we were talking before, you mentioned Wishclaw Talisman and the fact that it is pointed in Canadian Highlander. Do you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's an interesting point for people to think about.
Yeah, so Wishclaw Talisman is pointed now in Canadian Highlander, which is a format where they give points to powerful cards, and you can only place so many points in your deck. And the reason that it was pointed is because the synergy it has with Voltaic Key and KCI is just so powerful that it wasn't being properly punished by the point system. And so I started brewing around Wishclaw Talisman because I saw that in other formats it was so powerful, and I felt like no one was playing it in our format. I've seen people play it, but a lot of times they're just like, I'm going to hold on to this until the turn I win. But with cards like Goblin Engineer, you can search your library for an artifact, put it in the graveyard, and then you can tap it and pay a red to sacrifice an artifact to put an artifact from your graveyard into play that costs 3 or less. So you can put the Wishclaw in the graveyard, sack a Signet or something to get your Wishclaw, then wait a turn, tap your Wishclaw, put the ability on the stack, then sack the Wishclaw to get back the artifact you sacked to get the Wishclaw, and now you get to tutor for a card and you get your artifact back. And so, although that took a few turns, that's like a thing you can start doing every turn now. Especially if you get a Voltaic Key off your Wishclaw Talisman or some other way to untap permanents, you can start to do really crazy stuff with Wishclaw Talisman. It's super powerful. Oh, also with Wishclaw Talisman, interesting thing you can do is you can tap the Wishclaw Talisman, then you can sack the Wishclaw Talisman to KCI, then pay the mana for the Wishclaw Talisman ability, and that's all fine because the KCI ability is a mana ability, and you're allowed to pay costs in any order. You put the ability on the stack, and then you pay the costs, and you can pay the costs in any order. So it allows you to do that little trick, and that's really cool, I think.
Yeah, Wishclaw Talisman definitely feels like it is another one of those cards that people have been using sort of for face value, which is fine, but it can be explored more. Once again, a shout out to the Animatu Discord. They have been using that card for quite some time because if you have Animatu out, you can activate Wishclaw Talisman and then -1 Animatu targeting the talisman, and you get it back on your side without your opponent ever having the chance to use it because it can only be activated on a person's turn.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, it's a pretty spicy synergy. One thing I very much enjoy about Animatu is those little bits of increased value.
The first time I blinked my Gilded Drake with an Aminatu, I think I cried. It was like one of the most beautiful things I've ever seen. I'll take that, and I'll take that. It's so good.
That's pretty cool. Yeah, it's a list I've wanted to build for a long time. I've just been looking at the plan B of the deck and trying to figure out how I can shift it more to my playstyle, because right now it's like half Consult, half Opus Thief, but I personally feel like it's missing a good amount without red. So I'm interested to like try and see if there's another angle the second half of the deck can take, you know?
Yeah.
So before we got super sidetracked on all that, we were talking about Keranos. And that was the Underworld Breach loops were kind of the last place I left the deck. I am currently taking a thought break for it because the deck was frustrating me quite a bit, and I want to take some time to explore some other stuff and then come back to it. But right now, I think the plan is to play cards like Underworld Breach and maybe Jace Vryn's Prodigy, and like really try and just play as many mana artifacts as I can, play things like Blood Moon and Back to Basics, and really just try and jam some turn spells out. So we'll see how that goes. And the other lists that I wanted to talk about today were the Kefnets. And yes, I said Kefnets, plural.
They're both so sweet. They're just so cool.
Yeah, because in the past 2 weeks, I have built both Kefnet the Mindful and God Eternal Kefnet. This was a character I've enjoyed in Magic for a really long time. And when I was playing Casual Commander exclusively, Kefnet the Mindful, when it first came out, was just a card that really, I don't know why, like it's such a simple design, but it really like piqued my interest. I think at one point I was playing like card draw Voltron and just like making sure I had 7 cards in my hand at all time and then smacking people in the face with a 5/5. So I'm going to do it in reverse printing order because one of these decks has a spot in the database and the other one does not. So I guess I'll start with that sort of contradiction there. So God Eternal Kefnet is 2 and 2 blue, and it says that whenever you draw your first card for turn, if it's an instant or sorcery, you can cast it for 2 colorless less. So basically the point of the deck is to get an effect like Jace the Mind Sculptor or Scroll Rack, or maybe like a Brainstorm on an Isochron Scepter, and put the top card of your deck as a Time Walk spell. So something like Capture of Xingzhou, Time Warp, or Temporal Manipulation. Cards like that. Put them on top of your deck, and then Kefnet will trigger as you draw your first card for turn. You get to cast the copy for 2 mana less, and then put the original card in your hand. Then during your turn, you get to use the Brainstorm effect either on Jace, Scroll Rack, or on Brainstorm itself, and put that card back on top. So from there, you usually use bounce spells and bird beats to kill the whole table. Yeah, I mean, when you have infinite turns, it's one of those things where you have infinite turns, it really doesn't matter at that point. But yes, most of the time it is by playing God Eternal Kefnet and forwarding people in the air until they are dead. And that's basically that list. I know there's a lot of people who have been working on it for some time. I actually lost to a version of that list at the DDM event because I had thought my opponent was holding up counterspells and was sorely mistaken. Have you seen that one in the wild yet, Braden?
No, I don't think I have. I'm a big fan of both Kevnet decks. I think they're both sick. I've tried to play them both, I'd say, but I haven't put enough effort. I've never actually had a full list compiled. It just hasn't happened.
Yeah, that's fair. Some spicy moments from playing God Eternal Kefnet from last week. My opponent was about to windfall, and I mystical tutored and put a Time Walk spell on top in response to the windfall so I could cast it. Another one is the deck is playing Into the Story, which
what is that?
Is an instant. It's from Throne of Eldraine, and it's a 7 mana spell, instant blue. It's 5 and 2 blue, and it says draw 4 cards. And if an opponent has 7 or more cards in their graveyard, it costs 3 colorless less. So if they have 7 or more cards, it's 2 and 2 blue, draw 4 cards. However, with Kefnet out, if that's the first card you draw in your turn, and your opponent has 7 or more cards in their graveyard, like I did the other week, I paid 2 blue mana to draw 4 cards, which
oh my god. Awesome. That's like Ancestral Recall. That's like...
Yeah, it's, it was pretty awesome.
That must have felt powerful.
I mean, there was a bunch of... When I get, a Scroll Rack or a Divining Top on top of my library, I am just casting every spell under the sun for so little mana, and it's awesome. Just being able to flip over a Time Walk or a 2 mana Factor Fiction like I did the other day, it feels great to play.
2 mana Factor Fiction is sick.
Yeah. And the deck's really interesting. I started the format playing mono blue. Basically, as I've mentioned in the show before, I started with blue-black Scepter decks, and then my first deck that I devoted a lot of time to was Fibblethip. It's still funny.
That deck was awesome. Yeah, I was super excited when you built it.
Yeah, I actually won a fair amount of games with Fibblethip.
Because he's sick.
Yeah, it was a fun
He
deck.
draws a card.
It feels really... It does feel good to go back to my mono blue roots, though. It's just, there's something simple about just playing mono blue in a control style deck that just gains you a lot of value and eventually could just snap off a win. I was gonna say, it's also nice because, like Braden talked about with Yuriko earlier, like, people have an idea how the deck works. They're like, oh yeah, time walks, but they still aren't gonna evaluate you like you're playing a Thrasios Tymna deck. So that's kind of nice.
I don't want to sound like the worst, but there are people who are just like, there are a few people in the cEDH community, I'm not one of them, that are just better at deck building than most of us. And they seem to put a lot of their time, they seem to find something. I was talking to Sick about this last night. I considered him in that group. We derive enjoyment from deck building from different things, which is fine. We both like respected the way we both felt, but I think that means that like some decks just don't get optimized. There's people who are working on them and improving them, but I like Sick is just a better deck builder than I am. Like if Sick was spending all of his time on Yuriko, I think Yuriko would be a lot better than my deck. Probably be a lot better than the DB. So I think it's important that, you know, people check out lists that haven't been explored by those people, because you can make huge advancements in like the technology of the deck just by like trying crazy stuff, which is a lot of fun.
Yeah, speaking of Sick, two of my lists that I have gotten definitely the most talk about and traction on working on have been Old Kefnet, which I'm going to talk about next, and Croxa. My version of the Croxa list that I worked off of and have been playing with was originally Sick's list. And it was sort of his like original brainstormings of it, and I'm glad to like continue that work and continue putting effort into like making the lists better. So the next one I'm going to be talking about is 3-mana Kefnet, also known as Amonkhet Kefnet, also known as the Kefnet that I told myself I would not buy an invocation for unless I went 2-0 in my league, and then won one round and was like, you know what, I'm doing it anyways.
You monster.
It's just so pretty.
I got the Invocation Doomsday. It's not so pretty, but
I don't think I've seen the Doomsday one. I mean, I probably...
It's Nicol Bolas. It
one...
is sick. Like, the art is sick.
So, original Kefnet. The list I picked up, as I mentioned, was a Sick Robot Brew, and his list was running a 3-tiered win con, which I have 100% kept because it's kind of awesome. So, the first one is, I mean, it's a soft win con, and that's casting Polymorph on your commander. So there are 3 creatures in the deck. There is Nezahal, the Primal Tide, which is a 7/7 that is basically a Mystic Remora on a 7/7 body that can't be countered, and you can exile 3 cards to exile it until the end of turn and have it come back. The other creature is Consecrated Sphinx, which I hope everyone knows at this point, and Jin Cataxius, which is like an 11-mana spell that makes everyone discard their hands and lets you draw 7 at your end step.
Seems good.
So, yeah, so being able to polymorph Kefnet, as you could probably guess, may allow you to win the game. So, the really cool part about having Kefnet is that it is, even without 7 cards in your hand, it is still an indestructible creature. And the wording on polymorph says destroy target creature and then continue with the effect of flipping until you reveal a creature. So Kefnet does not get destroyed, and you get a giant fatty from your deck for 4 mana, and that's pretty awesome, because sometimes I'm just like, Mystical Tutor for my turn 3 Jin Cataxius.
So good.
The second way to win in the deck is to win with Isochron Scepter Dramatic Reversal, because Kefnet is a card draw outlet in the command zone. You do need a blue source of mana, but that's not hard at all. And you make infinite mana, you draw your whole deck, and from there, you can do a number of things like just cast every turn spell in your deck, beat your opponent to death, play all of your big fatties. Like, at that point, you win the game. And the third win con in the deck is using loops with Mystic Sanctuary. So, the way Kefnet's ability is worded, it says 3 and a blue, draw a card, and then you may return a land you control from the battlefield to your hand. So what you do is you have an extra turn spell, say just a Time Warp. You have that in your hand. You cast Time Warp, and then you play Mystic Sanctuary. The Mystic Sanctuary triggers if you have 3 or more islands, which you need like 9 mana to execute this combo, so I assume you have 3 islands at this point.
In your mono blue deck?
In your mono blue deck, yeah. And Mystic Sanctuary comes in, puts the Time Walk spell on top, then you activate Kefnet's ability, and you draw the Time Walk spell, and you bounce the Mystic Sanctuary to your hand. And through this loop, you are not only still drawing, but taking infinite turns. And from there, you can kill people with an indestructible 5/5 in the air. So that's pretty awesome. And I've actually gotten that combo to work more than you think. The one problem with the deck that I run into literally all the time, with that loop specifically, is you have a little card called Mana Crypt. And sometimes you can't win the game because infinite turns means infinite chances to just kind of die to your own Mana Crypt. Which stinks.
Oh, that's a problem.
Yeah, we're running cards like Chain of Vapor, Transmute Artifacts, Blink of an Eye. Like, we have a lot of ways to mitigate that issue. So, the deck's really fun. The deck's really exciting to play. The big downside of the deck, I'd say, is it does suffer the double stacks problem that we've mentioned before, which is it does suffer under Null Rod and it does suffer under Curse
Yeah,
Totem,
that's really rough.
which is heartbreaking, and I hate to say it. However, that is where the polymorph line comes in, because those creatures allow you to really break parity in that board state and like draw you to answers.
Yeah, if your opponents are discarding their hands and you're drawing 7 cards a turn, you can probably win through a grindy lockdown board state, maybe.
Yeah. I would hope. That also being said, it's interesting because I've noticed while playing the deck, you really have to adapt a lot. I'm not often like aggressively tutoring for Isochron Dramatic, which is nice because sometimes you just get it and win. And there are also times where, you know, you're going for the Mystic Sanctuary loop and then they play a Curse Totem and you're like, okay, let me just, instead of using this personal tutor to go get whatever I was going to get, maybe like a Time Walk spell, I'm going to get the Polymorph instead. However, there are some games where your opponents play a Grafdigger's Cage, and you're like, well, I definitely can't go for the Polymorph plan now, so let me switch back over to the Time Walk loop. And that's why I enjoy the deck, is because even though it does suffer from very common stacks pieces, when you are under the lock of those pieces, you can still adapt your game plan and switch over to the next version, which is awesome to be able to play that way. I'm a big fan of decks with multi-tiered win cons, and I like keep coming back to playing Kefnet because of that, because it's probably my, like, I don't know, my best tier 3 deck. I don't know, it seems like it's really, really fun to play, and it is a really fun deck that leads to really interactive games, and being able to be like, all right, this win con didn't work, going for the second one, and okay, I'm just going to value jam some Time Walks. That's totally something you can do, especially because you're playing Mystic Sanctuary. So I've actually had a game recently where I just played a Time Warp to just give me another turn for value, and my opponents knew I wasn't going to loop with it, so they were like, okay, like, and they also were like light on removal and stuff, so I was able to take that extra turn, and then when I wanted to combo off, I had the Time Walk spell in my graveyard for the Mystic Sanctuary loops, which was really cool. So it's really fun. It's a really fun deck, and anyone interested in the deck list, I can type that up within the next 24 hours because I haven't done that yet. So maybe by the time you're listening to this, I'll have that typed up.
How well does the deck, like, grind? So you basically have a Thrasios in the command zone. Do you feel like you get to just, like, sit back and activate that ability a lot of the time?
That's interesting, yeah. So the deck is playing Training Grounds, which helps with that sort of conundrum. Training Grounds games are often games where the deck does grind the best. There are a lot of, also, some of my artifact ramp, like, goes all the way up to Gilded Lotus, so I am really, like, pushing the amount of extra available mana that I have in most games. The cool thing about playing a mono blue deck like this is it is kind of like having a Thrasios deck, where a lot of the time, like, my hand is all instant speed spells, and anything relevant I can be doing, I'm playing at flash speed, and therefore I can hold up that mana a lot, and I will have the 4 mana and extra time to do it. Those early turns are definitely more complicated, I would say. You definitely want to, like, mulligan until you have a hand with a sufficient amount of ramp in it, because being a mono blue deck at the table, you cannot keep up with the other decks if you are trying to just play an island and pass. Like, that's not... And, I mean, that's any deck that isn't playing green, right? Like, you have to be going for those mana rocks. But yeah, it does. I think it does grind really well because you have a lot of answers. You have a lot of cards that play into your play style. So because it's a deck that's, like, sitting back a lot or occasionally jamming a Time Warp, but, like, because it's a deck that is very, very blue in nature, you're playing a lot of cards that fit into that play style really well.
I have another question.
Yeah.
Do you ever feel like you have a hard time answering Tymna? You have 3 creatures in your deck, and your commander can't block. So do you ever feel like you're just letting the Tymna player get away with it?
Sure, that is a problem that does exist. I'm not gonna allow that to, a lot of people who play these decks in like mono blue and stuff are like Teferi. They're like, oh well, I run into it every once in a while. I do play a responsible amount of removal for that circumstance. I also have found that the deck grinds a lot and like takes a lot of time to like get there. I've been relatively lucky to have a healthy hand during Tymna games, so like Kefnet can be a blocker in those circumstances, and they're not removing an indestructible 5/5 blocker anytime soon. And if there is Tymna at the table, as I said, I do have like a good amount of removal. It depends. I've run into a couple Tymna decks so far. They just get there sometimes. But I would say for a mono blue deck, I'm not like worried about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It is definitely a factor in the deck, but I am playing a healthy amount of cards that I would say respect that factor.
Interesting. Okay.
It's a problem. Once again, I'm not trying to pretend like Tymna isn't an amazing card and that this is a deck that doesn't block him as effectively as some. So
yeah, I just was curious about that.
No, it's a really good question. I know a lot of people want to like in general when they're asked that question they want to like fill in the answer a little bit, and so I'm trying to give as genuine an answer as I possibly can.
Yeah, I understand.
So thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of the cEDH cast. We were really excited to plan this episode because we just wanted to talk about some decks we were genuinely really excited and passionate about. And we got to talk about a lot of cards that are really exciting for us as people who brew in the format. So thank you for joining us on this little side adventure. Braden, before we go, do you want to tell our listeners all the amazing places we can be found across the interwebs?
You can find us on Twitter at the cEDHcast. You can find us on Instagram at the cEDHcast. You can find us on Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, YouTube. We're on YouTube too. I'm on Facebook, I guess. I don't know. Add me. Yeah. That's about it. Oh, we also have a Discord.
Yeah.
Let me talk about the Discord.
Come join our Discord. We're hip-hopping.
Yeah, so we have a Discord. People hang out there. We ask for ideas there. Like for this podcast episode, we asked for ideas. Although I don't know if we actually used any of them. I'm reading it right now. Okay, did. Yeah, we did. Good. So yeah, we ask questions from people in the Discord. And we tried to use the advice. Sometimes we're already recording an episode by the time we get some of it. But yeah, it like the first place I showed off my new Yuriko list was our Discord. Because I like to show off to people I know who will at least be interested. So if you're interested in seeing the weird decks we're working on, the Discord's a great place to hang out. If you have any questions, just feel free to reach out.
Yeah, we're always happy to engage with people, and we love being a part of this community. So thank you everyone so much for joining us here on the cEDH cast. From all of us here, have an amazing week. Bye!